Back in 2015, a little-known game known as Undertale released. Oh, hang on, wait, that's not right, is it? A critically acclaimed and massively popular game known as Undertale, released by Toby Fox and some other people that he worked with, I guess. Players had no idea what they were in for. So why was this game so popular despite looking at a game from the mid-90s? There's a number of reasons why, but there's also a number of drawbacks. Just before we get on with the video, I would like to clarify a few points, the obvious being that these are my own opinions, and as such, may differ from yours. This video is mainly for people who haven't played the game before and are wondering why people such as myself like the game so much, even to this day. If you have any thoughts or experiences with the game, please share them in the comments, although there's still reasons to play even if you completed the game. Second of all, there will be minor spoilers, but I'll keep them as minimal as I can, although if you somehow avoided spoilers this long, then I want to know what rock you're living under. So, let's start with the music. The soundtrack to the game is incredible. There's not only a variety of tracks to listen to, but almost every track has a remix to suit a particular mood, from calm to melancholy to upbeat to full-on cinematic climax. There's a track for basically anyone. Many people have pointed out said remix to the point that it became a meme that Toby only made a few tracks just to remix the rest. To me, this is actually a strength, as each track holds a particular theme, whether that be a boss or preparing you for fights and or story segments ahead. I find it really cool every time somebody points out how one track is a remix or a sped up or down version of another track. Next is the fourth wall breaks. From the characters to the story to the map is full of references to pop culture, such as Earthbound and shoot 'em ups, and parody of game mechanics such as dialogue boxes and combat. For example, seeing Toriel here, one of the first characters you encounter, intervene during a fight that you don't have to engage already tells you the light-hearted tone of this game, well, for the most part. One point that I haven't seen many people mention is just how easy the game is to run on basically any hardware. Not only has it been ported to many consoles, even the PS Vita, which I may do a video on if people want it, I'll cover the consoles edition later, but it's also so easy to run that as long as your computer can install Undertale, it can run it in my experience. I even got it running on a Mac from 2008, which you can watch here if you would like. It's also available on Linux and even Mac OS, so unless you're exclusively a mobile gamer, there's a way to play this game. I do wonder why it hasn't been ported to mobile yet though. Then it's the attention to detail. Similar to the fourth wall breaks, the amount of things Toby and his team thought about is pretty impressive to say the least. With every playthrough, there's a change, from tiny Easter eggs or references to completely different character dialogue or gameplay. Like this one, where Sans asks if my fridge is working. Wait, how did he know? Well, I mean, seems to be working. Hang on, let me just check the fridge. Let's see what... Sans, my man! Dude, thanks for that. Didn't expect free alcohol. Although eventually you'll run out of new things to experience and it's not procedurally generated. It gives you a reason to experiment with different playthroughs or interactions to see how characters react. Now I'll talk a bit more about platform-specific features. I would put a spoiler warning here, but you'll have to look up a guide to even know how to access them. At this point you've spoiled it for yourself. For the console versions, there's an extra room that's used for anything from a carnival on the Switch to an actual casino on the Xbox version. Besides a few extra characters and dialogue, that's basically it however. Still, it gives you a reason to buy the game again if you've switched to a different platform for any reason, which I really like. Practically the biggest double-edged sword with this game, and probably the biggest reason why some people dislike the game, is the community. I won't comment much on this as I don't know much about it, but from what I've seen, people either adore the game and treat the characters like their own family, or people hate the community due to its over-obsession with the game. Obviously there's a middle ground, where I sit, but for the most part there's either of the two extremes. There's been a lot of cool things such as fan art, fan games, etc. from the community, but there's also been a lot of harassment and gatekeeping as well, especially in 2016 at the peak of the game's popularity. Nowadays, the community seems a lot more chill, so now's definitely a good time to jump in if the community was your main concern. Although, like with any community, just be careful and do your research. Now we're on to the two biggest strengths, the story and the charm of Undertale. Now again, there will be minor spoilers here, so you've been warned. There's three main timelines or routes to take with this game: pacifist, neutral, and, can I even say this word on modern YouTube, genocide route. Unlike most games, the story alters drastically depending on what route you take, even after multiple playthroughs, which is why most people recommend you do either the neutral or pacifist route first before a genocide run, as you'll miss huge chunks of the story and character development on said run. I would recommend doing a neutral run first, as you're getting to grips with the game and understanding its mechanics, then pacifist, then genocide, if you're brave enough that is. The story and character development happens most in the pacifist route naturally, as it's kind of hard for people to tell a story when they're dead. The basic premise of Undertale is that a human, presumably a child, slips and falls into a cave near Mount Ebot sometime in the 2010s. The human wakes up in a bed of flowers, only to find a flower, which I won't mention much as they're a major part of the plot, and Toriel mentioned above, who doesn't have as much of a role but still a significant one. The reason why not only they, but also all of the other monsters are underground is because of a war that the humans won, and hence sealed the monsters underground to keep the monsters at bay. There's so much more to the story than simply that, but just for context you'll have an idea as to what's happening. The main reason why the story is so important in Undertale is because of how it's told and the characters that tell it. The story is mostly told through dialogue as opposed to books or narration, even though they are important as well. Each character has their own personality, viewpoint, experiences, interactions, and more. They each feel unique and like actual people that you can relate to in some way. They don't feel like they're just there because they have to be. This goes not just for the main characters, but for bosses, enemies, merchants, even random NPCs. Every character has something unique and interesting about them. This, along with the art style reminiscent of classic RPGs from the SNES or Mega Drive era of gaming, adds a nostalgic element to those who grew up with those games, whilst providing plenty to do for new players. One of the biggest and heavily advertised components of Undertale is the fact that you don't have to kill or even harm any enemies you encounter, something contrary to almost every game in existence. Although obviously Undertale wasn't the first game to implement this, because of how well fleshed out and likeable even the most aggressive enemies are, you wouldn't want to harm them, which adds to the emotional attachment people have with the game. Well, unless you're going for the genocide route, but even then the game punishes you emotionally for doing so. So that's the positive. I'm sure there's a few more, but those were the ones that stuck out to me. That doesn't mean it's a perfect game, however. Most of the negatives are nitpicks and gripes, but still. The first gripe I have is that there's no platform-specific optimizations. Although the story and gameplay is slightly different, every version is 4:3 and at 30 FPS. Even on PC, there's no option for custom aspect ratios or frame rates. True, it doesn't need high frame rates like a racing or FPS game would, but the boss fights would be at least a little bit easier. On the console versions, you can have borders to fill the extra space, which is a nice compromise, but isn't on PC for some reason. I get that 4:3 was an artistic choice, but it would be nice nonetheless. The main issue I have is the linearity. True, it's not as linear as Deltarune is, but one of the things I would really like to see is more towns and more side quests or missions. There's still quite a few, but most of them are one-off jokes that only last a few minutes. Having multiple towns to visit other than Snowdin would add extra longevity to the pacifist or neutral runs, as most of the game consists of corridors and cutscenes. A similar point is that the game can get repetitive after multiple playthroughs, as you have to go through the same rooms, for the most part, for every playthrough. So for example, if you wanted to find one particular Easter egg or change one specific part of a playthrough, you have to start right from the beginning, as there's only one save file. Yes, there are plot reasons for this, but a way in the settings to skip dialogue or rooms that haven't changed after at least one playthrough would make finding secrets a lot more fun, in my opinion. The last thing that got annoying for me is that some parts of the game's core story is hidden by vague dialogue or cryptic hints. The best example is the true pacifist route. Yes, there's two pacifist options, but in order to enable it, you have to backtrack multiple times and do fun but seemingly inconsequential side quests in order to enable it. And yes, I had to look up a guide to do it. You could argue that this is supposed to be hidden for plot reasons, but to me, this is a more accurate ending than the standard pacifist ending, and hence should have a more prominent role. So that's the video. Definitely a bit longer than I expected, but I only included what I thought was important to mention. Overall, Undertale is a fantastic game despite its simplistic visuals and slow start, but it's really the story, characters and ending that really show why people like this game so much, and why it makes it more than just another RPG. If you like this video, then go and make someone a butterscotch pie. I'm sure they could go and do with one, and I've got other game reviews, probably here somewhere, coming up if you'd like to watch those as well. See you.